Oh, and Audacity. 3, 2, 1.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with the co-host, Marissa Roy. I didn't say that right. Let's do that again.
Oh my God, please keep it.
Oh, man. All right. Well, in today's episode, oh, man, we are going to be talking about, we're off to a great start. We're going to talk about what to do when you've gone backwards.
Yes. So Marissa Roy here. And so yeah, we got this episode idea from, well, I thought of it because there's a client in particular who's really been struggling, and like, in all honesty, they have gone backwards, in part due to a funk and in part due to just like us needing to be on top of them more than we were. And like, that's something that I carry a lot of guilt towards, because I hate it when clients go backwards. But also I think it's a good opportunity to learn, why did we go backwards in the first place? And how do we build in the tools and the resiliency to not go backwards again and actually make, this time the last time type of thing. And I know you had a really good parallel with this whole topic as well, so we can kind of take it from two angles.
Yeah. So when Marissa and I were kind of brainstorming this topic, the first thing I was thinking about, of course, like I'm viewing it from the lens of my own experience. And this is kind of how postpartum feels, that you have this, incredible physique, if that is you, if that's your normal, and then you get pregnant and you have a baby and you feel very, very like it doesn't feel like your body. And it feels like you have just taken this giant step backwards. And I mean, obviously it's a little bit different, like your organs have shifted and there are things that need to take a little bit of time to like get back into place. So something that I've been seeing is like, I mean, postpartum, my ribs were super flared. And like sports bras were super uncomfortable, and the bands were always really tight. And like the longer postpartum I've been, the more that they've kind of come back down, like feeling a little bit more normal. And like that stuff, like, of course you can help with like training, but a lot of it is just time.
Yeah.
And so it's really difficult to watch your body and to feel like I just went from being in this great shape, and then, and it's really funny because like before I got pregnant, I was trying to lose weight, and I was like, why am I not losing weight? And I like wasn't like 100% comfortable with where I was. And I like, now I'm like, I would kill to look like that.
Yeah.
So it is really interesting, especially like being out of the gym, depending on how active you were, leading up to giving birth, and then postpartum, usually it's about 4 to 6 weeks. I would say to wait a little bit longer before you get back in. So after all that, getting back into the gym, everything just feels so brand new. Like your strength is gone. Your body doesn't quite feel like yours. Everything is just really weird. And it feels like not only are you just starting again from scratch, it almost feels like you've taken this giant step backwards.
Yeah. Well, and like kind of along the same like train of thought as well, for this client in particular, they like actually had some hormonal issues as well, like throughout the whole funk. And I think a little bit of it was maybe like stress related, sleep related. Like, we're still trying to really figure that part out, which is why it was kind of hard during this phase of feeling like they were going backwards when they should have been maintaining. It was hard to not just be like, let's just diet again, like,
Right.
because we could kind of try to reverse this. But the reality of it was like their body was like really, really fighting them, and their metabolism and their immune system, literally everything was like shutting down at a certain point. So like, it was very much like we had to outsource labs. We had to like do a lot, to basically just try to figure it out. And we don't have it 100% solved, but I think there's lessons to be learned from this. And I'm currently, learning, going through it as, we continue to coach them. But when someone's gone backwards, like that. And especially when someone's hormones and like their whole physiology is fighting them. And then, in your case, postpartum, your physiology has physically changed. There is so much of a number that this does on someone mentally. And learning how to grapple with that is honestly probably one of the hardest parts of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we've talked about this before with postpartum is like so many women get, not only do we have this like bounce back culture, right? Like, I got to get right back into shape and look so good. But like you're saying, it's your hormones. Like if you jump into a dieting phase too soon, you're going to set yourself up to be in an even worse position. So it's really difficult to feel like, all right, I just need to be patient. I need to actually, this is probably a really good time to reverse diet, even though it's like quite the opposite of what you really want to do. And I'm sure that the client that you have feels the exact same way. Like they want to diet, but like with where their hormones are, if they were to do that, it would just exacerbate and make things even worse. So it's really hard to be like, well, what do I do now? Like I'm stuck. I want to move like forward. I want to lose weight. I want to get back into shape, but I can't do that right now.
Yeah. And so we kind of even feel more stuck because we can't take massive action to change things. And that's the thing too. Like a lot of times when people are like feeling like at their worst, they typically are more apt to take massive action. So not always, but for a lot of people, like baby steps just don't really work for a lot of people, where like they jump into something all in or they don't jump in at all. And so when someone feels that bad, whether they've gone backwards or they're just in a position that they don't feel good about themselves in, they tend to take massive action. This is where a lot of clients will invest in themselves for the first time, go on a coaching journey, lose the weight, whatever it is. But I think, something that can be learned from this in hindsight is kind of how to prevent going backwards in the first place. And like you said, kind of maybe we have to take a direction that isn't exactly like, let's fix this right away of like, let's diet, let's jump right in. But also sometimes like preventing going backwards in the first place means learning how to take those baby steps, learning how to accept small steps, small wins, and growing from that. So in this situation, we're kind of like, this client is now starting to really come out of this funk. We're starting to see better physiological just states of being. They're a little bit more energetic. A lot of those like really sluggish and fatigued states have kind of faded away. And they were immediately like, I feel better. Let's fix this. Let's go all in. And I was like, oh, well, how about instead of going from A to Z, let's go from A to B first, and then B to C, then B to D. And I kind of like, something that really helped them was just me painting that picture of like, this is what A to D looks like. And these are the steps we're going to take in between. So A to B is here, B to C is here, C to D is there. Because a lot of times the resistance that people like this have around baby steps is simply just not knowing what the last step looks like, right? They only know how to go from A to Z or A to D. If they don't know what's in between, then they're not going to want to buy into doing that. And so I kind of painted the full picture out and I said, let's try A to B, B to C, C to D. We'll go from there. And they were much more like, okay, I can do that. And I think that's a learning lesson for maybe how to prevent going backwards again, or how to prevent it in the first place. If maybe you're listening to this and you're like, this sounds valuable, but I haven't been in this position. If you're on a journey like this, like a weight loss journey, a fitness journey, anything, going backwards is honestly pretty normal for most of America who goes on a fitness journey and loses weight. So this is really important insight for you to take and use in the future, to make sure that you are kind of just taking it slow and steady, like training yourself on these baby steps and understanding that it doesn't have to always be 0 to 100.
Yeah. And I like the idea of kind of like labeling where the client is too. And I think kind of giving at least like a tentative timeline can help a lot, because then it doesn't feel like, well, I'm just going to be in this limbo stage forever. And so having like you just being like, okay, well, we can't diet, but here's what we can do instead. Like, let's really take the next 2 months to optimize your hormones. Like, let's really do a good job of mitigating stress, like whatever it might be. So then that client knows, okay, this is my focus for the next 2 months. we're going to reevaluate and then go from here. So it's like taking, we always talk about goal setting, like taking your overarching, your larger goals, breaking them down little by little, and it makes it that much more like digestible for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another way to prevent kind of going backwards in the first place is we just have to have kind of along the same thread, but like we can take this in a completely different direction too, I'm sure. Is just having different tools in our toolbox of mental resiliency, because the reality of it is we are always going to take steps backwards, no matter where we are on our journey, no matter how far along we are, no matter how much progress we've made. We're always going to have a time frame where we take a step backwards or maybe two steps backwards. But really what preventing, being at square zero or square one, sorry, that's the phrase, being at square one, preventing like going all the way back to the beginning or where you started or worse from where you started is really about being able to like just I lost my train of thought. Wow. Words are hard today.
For both of us, that's good.
Mental resiliency in place. And Shane, please cut this part out. Wow. I'm lost.
I don't know where you're going with that one.
This is kicking in. Can you say something in the meantime?
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and remember what I was saying.
Okay. Another aspect that we like to think about is the dial, right? So one of the reasons, and again, we're not just going to focus on postpartum or the client that you've been talking about, but whether it is someone that has gone through a dieting phase and maybe they're maintaining or whatever it may be, one of the things that we always talk about, and you guys are probably like, oh my God, they're going to talk about the dial, but we are, because we want to have sustainable frameworks that are in place so that you're able to maintain your progress. And so you might see someone on like whether it's Instagram or real life who like they are like killing it, like they're going to the gym 7 days a week for like 5 hours at a time, like they're super shreddy, like they've made all this progress, and you might look at them and be like, dang, like why is that not me, like whatever it may be. But a lot of people can't live that way. You can't live at a 10. So like trying to maybe not lower your expectations. Like we don't want to say like you shouldn't embody like, a healthy lifestyle, but just having like, hey, it's okay if I have a couple days that aren't like 100% or they aren't like my absolute best, knowing that I'm going to have days like that. And that doesn't mean that like it's going to continue into the next day, just like I can get right back on, like I can have a weekend off and have a little bit more fun and then get right back to it, and just kind of have a little bit more of a flexible approach, and knowing that's going to pay off in the long run. So if you're constantly jumping back and forth between like you have to be 100% or it's absolutely nothing, then you are going to go backwards, because you can't live in either of those mindsets.
Yeah, exactly. You can't live in those extremes of
Yeah.
I'm doing everything or I'm doing nothing, and like just learn how to be. Actually, we were talking to a client today on one of our calls, and she was basically, we go over a win and a struggle every week, and her struggle was like, yeah, I'm making it happen, but like I'm just only getting about like 80% of like what I need to get done. And like that's a good week right now. And she was like annoyed. And it was hilarious because I was like, hey, actually, it sounds like you're doing everything that you need to do. And in this phase of your life where you have all this busy stuff happening, this is what's realistic and this is what's sustainable for you. And like we sometimes just have so much trouble accepting that like 80% right now, like you might be able to push 90%, 100% later down the road and make quicker progress then. But like sometimes you just have to accept the 80% and say like, this is the best I can do right now in this arena of my life, because there's other areas of my life that are like detracting my energy. For her, it was a lot of travel. And that I know exactly how that can be. So yeah, I think just like accepting the fact that like we can't put out 100% at the time of the time. And I think a lot of times the issue is not in the actual execution of that. Like people can like easily be 80% consistent with something, but it's literally the acceptance of I am not doing everything all the time and putting everything on my back and, just harnessing it all, which is like what a lot of the people I feel like we relate to tend to want to do, that perfectionistic, that I can do everything mindset. So when we can kind of get over that and accept that, then we're able to have a more sustainable framework for what we're doing. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm thinking of, it's like that reframe, right? Like you have a client who's at 80%, compliance according to her, and she's upset with that. And then
Yeah.
having her come back and be like, "Hey, actually, no, this is great," and her being like, "Oh, yeah, you're right," and then continue forward. Like she's that much like more likely to continue doing what she's doing and either maintain or make additional progress. Whereas if she didn't have that support and resource, like she might have like given up or fallen back because she's like, I can't, if I can't do it at 100, then there's no reason to do it at all. So I think
Yeah.
that is really great.
So what you're saying is having support and accountability in this journey is very important to having preventing going backwards in the first place.
I think it's very important, Marissa.
Yeah. Shameless plug. Have a coach. I remember what I was going to say. So basically, what I was trying to get at when I had a total brain fart, and if it got cut out, then praise God, you didn't hear what all of that. But basically, one of the main things that we need to do to prevent going backwards in the first place is we have to have a certain amount of mental resiliency built up and tools in our toolbox for when we take one or two steps backwards, because oftentimes we think of our fitness journey and any kind of goal that we're pursuing as we're just taking steps forward, like one after the other after the other. But what we don't see is that the journey is not linear, just like weight loss, where it's going to be up and down as we go. We're going to have spikes on the scale. We're going to have big lows. It's not going to be an easy, like stepwise going down. It's the same thing with our journey. We're not going to progress in any sort of linear fashion. We're going to take 3 steps forward, take 2 steps back, take 5 steps forward, take 2 steps back. That's just how it's going to look. And so when it comes to preventing going backwards in the first place and kind of going back to square one, going back to where we started, it's about preventing taking leaps back. It's about preventing the spiral. It's about taking 1 or 2 steps back and being able to catch ourselves and say, okay, stop this. I know this pattern. This pattern is not good for me. It's feeding into these negative thoughts, negative behaviors, actions, whatever it is. And being able to catch that and then have a system and a tool in place to reverse your actions in the right direction. That is how we prevent going backwards all the way to where we started in the first place, because we have certain tools, structures, frameworks to help move us forward when we have taken steps back, not if, because I think if we try to consider the if of like, oh, if I take steps backwards, I will do X, Y, and Z. But I think we need to just expect that it's going to happen. Like we're going to mess up, we're going to screw up, we're going to have a weekend off or a week off or a month off, and it's going to happen. But that's just 1 or 2 steps back. And it's really just how you respond to that and move forward. That's going to help you prevent, a trend backwards or a spiral backwards. So that is what I was going to say.
I'm glad you remembered your train of thought. But yeah, I like it because we talk a lot about expectations as far as like if we're heading into a dieting phase, if we're heading into like a reverse dieting phase, like what this is going to look like, but really, really taking a huge step back, zooming out and looking big picture and saying like, what is my expectation for my health and fitness for my entire life? Like, what is that going to look like? And I think that's really important. Like you said, it's like, there are going to be ebbs and flows. We're going to have ups and downs, but really trying to say like, it's normal if we take a step back, but we don't want to go all the way backwards. But that is part of what we're going to do and what we're going to talk about today. Like, what if you have taken a leap back, if you're gone back a little bit further than you would have liked in the first place, and kind of like what to do and how to get yourself out of that funk.
Yeah, actually, that's kind of hilarious and like kind of ridiculous. When you really think about the expectations that we place on ourselves, though, when we think like, this is my healthy fitness journey. I'm going to the gym 5 days per week. I'm meal prepping every week. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I'm hitting all these targets, these arbitrary goals that we set for ourselves. And we think, this is that sustainable thing that I'm going to do every day for the rest of my life, right? Like, no, like it's about the themes of the actions and like the general way that we choose to take care of ourselves. And so when you're able to, like Christina said, just zoom out and look at the bigger picture of like progress or living a healthy lifestyle, like what we're actually working towards here is not any of these like, I'm going to hit this percentage of this goal this many days per week for this month, so I hit this target of this percent of my body weight. Like that is very much like we are in a bubble and we're focusing on a goal for a temporary period of time. And if we allow that to consume us and be like, that is now my life, then of course it's not sustainable. Of course, we're going to go backwards. Of course, we're going to fall off and end up back where we started, because we are kind of like just having a big misconception around what is the actual long-term goal. So if you want to prevent going back to where you started in the first place, have a realistic expectation for what a healthy lifestyle actually is in the long run. And I'll tell you right now, it's being able to listen to your body, honor it with movement, nourish it with good food, and be able to just catch yourself when you are falling into unhealthy patterns. That's it.
Yeah. That's it. End of the episode, guys.
Boom.
Yeah. So I think, you know, like if you are one of those people though, you're like, yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but I didn't do that. And so now,
Yeah.
now I'm in this place where I'm a lot further back than I would have liked. And so, I will say, and I, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Marissa, but I feel like both of us have been in that position where we like, especially coming from my very first prep, like you go from being in like the best shape, the quote unquote best shape, but you know, it's not necessarily the healthiest, but like what you feel like is the leanest and like the most muscular you've ever been. And then to go and try to navigate a reverse diet and then feeling like, oh my God, I'm worse than when I started this prep. Like, I feel like we've both been in situations where it's like, we feel like we're starting over, especially for me postpartum right now. Like that is definitely how I felt and how I, in a sense, still kind of feel. So if you're in that position right now, it's like, okay, well, now what do I do? How do I get out of this? Like, because I think sometimes what happens for some people is when they're in this stage, they feel like they are so far back that they don't really see any way out. They don't know what to do. They don't know the steps to take because it feels like impossible to get back to where they were before.
Yeah, or it feels futile, right? Because like they worked all this way to get to some place, then they lost it and it slipped through their fingers. And so it's almost like more discouraging to pursue it again, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point too, because especially, and I'm thinking, you know, there are a couple clients that I'm thinking of, but even for myself, like, you know, I went from 2020 doing a prep, being in incredible shape, and then getting pregnant, and then going back to that gym postpartum. So like people that I've seen all the time, they've seen me at my like leanest, and they see me now, and like some of them don't know that I was even pregnant because I didn't go to the gym very often. So to like feel like, wow, like, you know, are people going to look at me? Are they going to stare at me? Are they going to make comments? Are they going to think I got fat? Like, are they going to judge me? It's sometimes hard to go back into that environment and try to like lift again. And like you were saying, like it feels like I know what to do. I've done it before, but like it's hard going back into that environment. And I know that a lot of clients that I have right now feel that same way. It's like they enjoy the gym, but they may feel a little bit more self-conscious than they did previously.
Yeah. I mean, this may or may not be helpful because I don't have that exact experience, but I think when people are concerned, right? Like they've been in a particular shape, all these people saw them a certain way. I actually talked to somebody yesterday who said that she like hides in big sweatshirts even in the summertime because she doesn't want the people that she knows in her workplace to actually recognize the fact that she's gained the weight that she has. And so I think something about this, and you know, take it or leave it, because I don't really know if it'll help because I haven't been in these exact shoes. But when you're really kind of self-conscious about other people's opinions of you, in that situation where your body's changed in a way that you don't like and you're trying to get started with changing it again, I would encourage you to ask yourself, like, who are you really doing this for? Are you doing it for those people? Like, what happens if they do think that, like, what's really going to happen? Are they going to confront you about it, or are they just going to have their thoughts and you'll probably never know what they're actually thinking? Most likely the latter. And that might just be one small way to diffuse some of the anxiety around that, is kind of like almost fear foreshadowing. This is a concept that I actually learned recently, but it's essentially like foreshadowing and thinking about what is the actual worst case scenario. Because a lot of times, if we try to actually play that out, it's not actually that bad. I actually had a good friend of mine ask me yesterday. We were talking about business and like business struggles that we were having. And she was just like, yeah, like I really fear humiliation. But when I played it all out, I realized that like the worst possible case scenario of that fear is literally that I would just figure something else out. If like, if everything failed and I got humiliated and blah, 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 like I would just figure it out. And so sometimes just foreshadowing what would actually happen if like you face that fear and it didn't go the way that you wanted, is the worst possible case scenario actually that bad? And who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for yourself, or are you doing it for the opinions of others? Because those who are only motivated by the opinions of others will have a harder time actually facing those fears, versus if you are able to root your goals back to, I'm doing this for me because I care about my body and I need to be in a different place for my health, mentally and physically, then usually we're able to better get past those types of fears.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, if you're like, oh man, if someone says something to me like, man, what happened? You got fat. And I'm like, could you like, I'm thinking about like the environment at my gym. Like if someone heard another person say that to someone, like they would rally against that person and like kick them out of the gym. Like, and you like, they would be like taking care of you in a sense. So it's like, kind of like, yeah, like it does sound like a worst case scenario, but then like what would actually happen after that? Like, and all these things. But I think that's a really good, it's a really good strategy and a really good technique to be like, okay, like, am I being like, not that it's not unrealistic, but just like, how do I get past this? Like, what is the absolute worst case scenario? Is it actually going to happen? Or if it does, like, how would I handle myself? So then you feel like you're more equipped going into that situation. Like, oh, I've already handled this and I know how to manage this particular situation.
Yeah, it's just like visualization as an athlete. Like I didn't really ever get too far into this as an athlete for like my own athletic career, because I never really got into the collegiate athlete scene, and that's where they really start to take that stuff seriously. But like visualization, like visualize yourself actually performing the play well versus bad, and what you play out in your head is going to play out in real life. And I think when it comes to fear foreshadowing, you can also leverage it the opposite way. So if you are trying to, and this is segueing us into the topic of, okay, so we are back to square one. We're back where we started. We need to get out of this funk and we need to move forward, even if it's treading the same ground that we've walked before. And that sucks. We can use fear foreshadowing to actually motivate us in the opposite way. And so instead of thinking, what's the worst case scenario? Oh, it's not that bad. We can kind of motivate ourselves with, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Actually, like, I don't want to be there, which means I need to take action. And this can be a touchy one. I would not recommend this for everybody because it really depends on what kind of state of mind you are in. But for some people, being able to like just play out what happens if you don't make a change, what happens if you don't move yourself forward from where you are, even though you've gone backwards, and what is the outcome of that? And this is actually a question that I often ask prospective clients, because I really need to dig into, like, is this person truly ready to change? Because when we're coaches, when we're giving someone an action plan, it's only going to work if they take action on the action plan. So I have to ask them questions that really tell me what happens if you don't change. And so I'll say, maybe in 6 months, maybe in 12 months, what happens? Where will you be? And sometimes that really kind of gives them the kick in the ass that they need to take a step forward, whether that's with a coach or without. At the end of the day, it's really about how do we ignite change in somebody's life. So you can use fear foreshadowing in one way or the other, but those are kind of two ways you can leverage it depending on what you feel like you need.
Yeah. In the example with the gym, it's kind of like, if you're scared to go, it's like, well, what happens if I don't go? Well, then I continue to stay stuck in this position. I continue to stay stuck with where I'm feeling. I don't want to feel that way. So I'm going to go.
Yeah. Well, then also too, and I think I heard this from last year's Global Leadership Conference, actually the weekend that Aaron and I signed our contract for this house. There was a speaker at that conference that her whole talk was about what's the best that could happen. So you can also leverage that. And if you're in a funk, you can, this is more along the lines of visualization, right? This is more along the lines of actually looking ahead and saying, okay, I'm going to visualize. And like, this kind of gets into the whole like, ooh, manifest your future thing. But like, think about what is the best possible case scenario that could happen if you do move forward again, and you do push through that resistance, and you do make yourself a priority again, even though you let it go. What's the best that could happen? You learn from your mistakes, you become more resilient, and you don't let it happen again. That's the best that could happen. And hopefully that is a motivating and hope inspiring thing for any of you who are in this position.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, one of the things that we talked about too is like giving yourself some compassion from where you are, and having acceptance. So instead of trying to like fight it or everything like that, just kind of accept your current reality and just be like, all right, this is where I am. Like, and then I think it's also important to think back of like what led you to being in that situation. So kind of like reflecting, analyzing, and saying like, okay, it was a combination of XYZ, or maybe something happened or whatever it might be. So kind of like in the future, like, hey, if I start to recognize that I'm feeling these feelings, or if something like this happens, like I can see the warning signs to not get back to where I am now. But I think the really big thing is compassion. So like, one of the themes that Marissa and I talk about a lot is like when you're going through your health and fitness journey, whether you're starting out, whether you've taken a lot of steps back, is making change because you love and honor yourself. Because if you're trying to make change because you hate where you're at and you hate your body and you're doing it out of punishment, your journey is going to be that much more miserable. So I think just saying like, reframing where you're at and taking that compassion, like I am honoring myself, and this is why I'm going to go to the gym, because I know it's going to help me feel better, like X, Y, and Z. So I think that's probably one of the best things that you can do, one of the first things that you should do before kind of starting to do all the things you need to do.
Yeah. And not only that, but when you operate from a place of self-hatred in this journey, you're going to build resentment towards the actions that you should be going to love, right? You're going to end up resenting going to the gym, meal prepping, because you're saying, well, I hate myself, so I have to do this, and I hate doing this, right? And I think it's important to make the distinction that like acceptance and compassion, and we're going to have a whole episode on this next week for you guys. So just stay tuned. It's going to be awesome. And we'll go really, really deep into what those things are and how you can exercise them. But I think it's really important to just make the distinction first that it's not like false positivity, or like I hate using this term, but toxic positivity, which is like a viral thing, but it's not positivity. And the most important thing about accepting where you are, I think a lot of people hear that and they say, oh yeah, like body positivity, I just need to love myself no matter what size I am. And like those concepts and theories are great, but like when it comes to actually making a change in your life, you're not going to go from like hating yourself to loving yourself just by making a decision. So when it comes to acceptance, I like to think of that more as going from negative to neutral. So your thoughts about where you are right now might be very negative. That's okay. And the first thing you need to do is tell yourself that's okay. And this is where I am right now. Not I hate my legs, my stomach, my body, myself, but this is where I am right now. There's no positive connotation to that. There is no negative connotation to that. It is simply stating where you are, and that it is a fact. Like that is it. And if you can move from negative to neutral, that will take you a lot less effort and a lot less feeling like you're BSing yourself. And then eventually you're going to be able to get into exercising compassion with yourself and giving yourself grace and truly getting to a positive place with yourself. But you're not going to get there by saying, wow, I hate myself, but I need to love myself. So tomorrow when I wake up, I will love myself. Like this doesn't happen no matter how many notes you leave on your mirror. Like I think that that's very unrealistic for most people. And if they try to make that jump, they will feel very ingenuine and just discouraged that they can't make that switch because there's so many people on social media that say, oh my God, I love myself no matter what, and are portraying this message that you can just flip a switch and all of a sudden do it. So I think just focus on going from negative to neutral, and you'll get much closer to positivity much quicker because you weren't forcing it in the first place.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to recognize that you're allowed to change yourself. Like, it's not like the acceptance of like you were saying, like, oh, I love myself the way I am, so therefore I don't need to change. Like,
Yeah.
you can change if you want to, but that doesn't mean that you have to hate yourself or like be super upset with your situation. Like, you can be like, hey, I'm comfortable with who I am and XYZ. I just want to change. And knowing that that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not happy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we have a whole episode. Do you remember what it is, the HAES movement? And
It's like 22 or
yeah,
something like that with Gabrielle Fundaro.
yeah. So if you want to dive into that a little bit deeper, that's a really good episode to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. I really, really like that one. But another reframe for you, if you are coming out of a funk, getting back up, starting at square one. I keep thinking to say square zero. It doesn't even make sense. But if you're treading the same ground that you've walked before, I think this is something where it's like, it can be very discouraging for somebody who, like, just a weight loss example, because this is what a lot of people go through. The average number of dieting attempts in the US is 14. I think we learned that from Eric Helms. So 14 times people are losing and gaining the same weight back and forth over and over again in their lifespan. That is wild. And that's an average, which means like the positive outlier of that might be like 60. Like it's insane. So, but with that, you've walked these grounds before. So why not use that as an advantage? Why not say, I have done this before and I have not been successful long term. So what can I learn from that? And really learn how to fail forward. So maybe you messed up, you went backwards, you lost some of your progress. What about, okay, how did that happen? Break it down, work backwards, see what actions trickled there, and then be able to catch yourself falling into those behaviors and those actions in the future. A lot of that comes down to mindfulness. And I think what's really important about mindfulness is this is why a lot of like diet culture-y things like keto and intermittent fasting and meal plans and things that don't allow you to think about what you're doing don't work, is because they don't allow us to implement mindfulness to actually catch ourselves in the behaviors that we are doing that are either moving us forward or moving us backwards. And so I think being able to look back at what you missed or messed up on the last time and be able to learn from that, and then be able to catch that the next time around and say, I'm actually paying attention this time and I'm going to stop this in its tracks. Again, like what I was saying earlier about taking 2 steps backwards, you might have regressed a little bit, but that doesn't mean that it's over and you have to give up and throw in the towel. It means that you have to be able to catch that pattern, whether it's a behavior, a thought pattern, or just a state of being, and then have something in place that's going to help you shift it forward. And we will probably get more into what those kind of tools are in the next episode, to be honest.
Yeah. And I love the idea of reframing and thinking about like, hey, I've done this before. I know what to do. Like, I know I can achieve this. Yeah, it's annoying, right? To take like a couple steps extra back than you would have liked, but like I can do it. And one of the great things too with muscle memory is it's going to be that much easier for you to get back to where you were than it is to be like, oh, if I was completely new starting this again, it would take me a lot longer. So maybe like reframing and be like, oh, so like it's annoying, but it's going to take me a lot less time than it would have if I were completely starting out and being a beginner, especially because I've learned from my mistakes. I know what does and doesn't work for me. So feeling like it's almost like to your advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the fact that you've achieved it before means like it's possible. I think a lot of times people have like really big goals. Like I want to lose 100 pounds. Like, let's say like you have 100 pounds to lose. I definitely know people in those shoes, and I've asked them, do you even think it's possible? Like, do you actually think you can get there? Like 1% inkling of hope. Is it there? And they're just like, I don't know. like, I just really don't know. But if you've done it and then you've regressed, you have literally proven to yourself that it's possible to get there. You haven't proven to yourself yet that it's possible to stay there, but you know you can get there. And then staying there will be the new battle that you have to choose to take on, which is probably something we should talk about in another episode.
Yeah, I feel like we always like bring up all these different topics. We're like, we should make an episode on that. We should make an episode on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. And I also love your little, I haven't done that yet. So a lot of growth mindset when it comes to this is so like the whole idea of like there are no failures, only learning opportunities. Like I know I can do it, like, or I haven't done it yet. So just, I mean, I know it sounds so silly, like, you know, we're talking about manifesting and like, you know, what's the best thing that can happen and all these things. But like, if you think about it, like if you have that mindset or if you make those small little adjustments to how you talk about yourself or how you view certain things, just think about how much further ahead you're going to be than someone who feels like, well, I'm never going to be there. Like, it doesn't matter if I do this. Like they just have like a very, very different mindset, then they're almost setting themselves up to be in that position. So I think that while we do, I mean, we have so many different episodes on growth mindset and things like that, because we really truly believe in it and just like the little changes that it makes with all of your actions.
Yeah, actually one of our coaches actually shared this with our team, and it was basically like a little switch to wording on a to-do list. So you might have like a daily to-do list of like, I need to get X, Y, and Z done. And you might write it in as like, do blah, 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 or make sure to call XYZ. But this person just wrote the items on their to-do list as called blank's name, achieved my 3 servings of blah, 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 got my workout in, and wrote it in the past tense as if it had already been done. That was cool because like, it's just a little shift of like, you wrote it as if it's already been done. So you are more inclined to then take action on it and do it and check it off. So that was like kind of a cool shift, but it just goes to show, I think, you know, when we talk about growth mindset and we're talking about all these things, it could be easy to like, you know, scoff at it and say, well, you know, that's great, but like, I need actionable steps.
Yeah.
Actually, these are actionable steps. The way that you speak, your language is so important. And there's so many different, like, just rabbit holes you can get into of why language is so incredibly important in actually just like programming your own thoughts and actions, which is a very fun like science to study in all honesty. But your language really does matter, whether it's talking about yourself, like actually like in the past tense, like, oh, the old me would have done blank, 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 but now I know better and I do X, Y, and Z instead. We had somebody actually say that recently about stress eating. And she mentioned like, I had an injury and I just wasn't feeling my best. And the old me would have just eaten everything and done blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I actually just didn't crave that anymore. And we were just like, yes, I love that. I love that you pointed that out.
Yeah. And I think it does. Like, again, it sounds very, very small, but those small little changes add up over time. So again, if you're here, you're 43 minutes in, it's like, all right, well, yeah, okay, you know, growth mindset, like expectations. And then like, what are my tangible takeaways? Like, what are some things that I can do if I am backwards in my health and fitness journey? What can I do?
Yeah. I think a big part of it is just learning from the mistakes that you've made and be able to course correct those moving forward. And a lot of them are really just like themes across everything we've already said. So like being able to take things slow and steady. So being able to go from A to B to B to C to C to D instead of A to D. Losing the perfectionistic mindset of thinking you have to be 100% all the time, changing your expectations for what the end goal actually is, right? Because we talked about like thinking that, I use this example a lot. People think that tracking macros is the healthy, balanced lifestyle. It's not. It's like literally a tool and just a step on the way to balance, mindfully eating, and being able to manage this all on your own. Kind of same thing with your fitness journey. You think that like the diet is your lifestyle. It's not. Like it is just a part of the process to get you to that end result. So if you mistake one for the other, you're often going to set yourself up for failure, because dieting is not sustainable by nature, right? So having expectations around that, and just being able to have mindfulness around what are these triggers, these behaviors that bring me into negative thought patterns, negative mindsets, negative behavioral patterns, that ultimately lead to spirals or have led to spirals in the past. And how can we actually catch those when we've taken 1 or 2 steps back instead of 20? So I think those are kind of just the themes of the tactical things that you need to do to prevent yourself from going backwards in the future, or, prevent yourself from losing your progress when you make it.
Yeah. And I love the idea of taking things slow. And that's the same thing we were talking about with the postpartum example, same thing with some other clients. It's like, if it took you X amount of time to get there, it's not going to take this juice cleanse to get you back to where you were before. Like you need to start slower, and you need to, again, it's the same way that we start like a dieting phase or just trying to get healthier phase. Like we don't go from 0 to 100 right away. Like we slowly implement some things in. So maybe you're like, okay, well, I took some time to think about the mistakes that led me to where I am now. Like maybe, like, man, 2020 happened, and I started working from home, and, I didn't move as much. So maybe one of the things I start implementing into my day is more daily movement. So like small little things like that. And then be like, all right, cool. I have movement down. Like what's something else that I can implement? Like movement is now a daily habit for me. So what is something else that I can now put into my, to-do list? So just like small little things like that over time, and realizing that, yes, while they may be, you're not going to the gym 7 days a week for 4 hours, like you are still taking actionable steps that are going to get you closer to where you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we exhausted this topic.
I think so too. I think we're pretty good. So, but I mean, if you, in all reality though, like if you are feeling like this and you're feeling like, well, I don't really know what to do, I don't know how to zoom out, reach out to both of us. Like we're here to help you guys. And we're here to maybe get you back on track and have a little bit of a game plan moving forward. I mean, we're more than happy to help you with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, perfect. Anything else?
Nope, that was good.
All right. Good luck, guys. But we hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. You can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Chrissy Lynn Fit, and Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope to see you back next week.